So, hi, this is Dave Michels from Talking Points. Thank you for joining. Today we have a video on video. I've got with me two esteemed professional analyst colleagues, Ira Weinstein. Go ahead, Ira.
Hey, pleasure to meet you. Good to see you guys.
All right. And Zeus Kerravala.
Hey, Dave and Ira. Always a pleasure to powwow with you guys.
All right. Well, video has been in a fascinating space for the past, a couple of years at least. And, I do this monthly report, and the video section is always the longest. I've been saying for a while that, I've been saying through most of 2019 that 2019 seems to be the year of video, but boy, was I wrong. It looks like 2020 is the year of video. So with that, let's go ahead and start talking about some of the recent things we're seeing in video. I'm going to start off with some acquisitions. We just recently saw the Verizon acquire Blue Jeans. Ira, you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think this was a great pickup. I think Verizon has spent a lot of time over many years trying to be in this space, and they've been reselling everybody's solution, but they haven't been able to add sort of the Verizon secret sauce to it. They couldn't productize it how they want. They couldn't innovate how they want. Picking up Blue Jeans gives them the ability to create their own roll your own service, which I think is a big deal for Verizon and Verizon customers. And I think, by the way, Blue Jeans needed more feet on the street, and they weren't going to fund it themselves. So this is a great way for them to get there as well. It's a good pickup.
Zeus?
Yeah, I think actually Blue Jeans, to Ira's point, did, and I think they should have been Zoom, frankly.
Yeah.
They came out with a VAS offering long before Zoom did, and they just never really managed to spend the money on the marketing they needed. And I don't think Zoom's product was really any better than Blue Jeans. In fact, I've talked to people that seem to like Blue Jeans more. Zoom really made video synonymous with happy meetings, right? The meet happy and all that stuff. And I think if Blue Jeans had put that money in back, they could have been Zoom today. So I think I'm not totally convinced that Verizon, they don't have a great brand when it comes to large enterprise and things, but certainly down market, when you're buying your connectivity and you're buying your internet services, bundling Blue Jeans type of service, it makes a lot of sense. So I think for their small, mid-sized customer base, it's ideal. I think up market, it's still, the dominant vendors that we know will still be the dominant vendors.
But if you look at
I'm a little more neutral than you two on this acquisition. I think it's probably good for Blue Jeans. I think Blue Jeans got a nice exit. It got a reasonable valuation. And I think that's all pretty good for Blue Jeans. I have to worry about anything that Verizon acquires. They have this notorious track record for absolutely the worst timing to acquire companies. And I wonder what this represents to the video industry. Are we at peak video or not? I don't think we're at peak video in terms of usage. We may be at peak video in terms of ecosystem and players. And of course, with the virus, of course, all these video companies have become more valuable, which is the perfect time for Verizon to make an acquisition, which to me would suggest that things might be heading south for the ecosystem. But I'm also a little worried about network net neutrality, because the CEO of Verizon made some comments about how they're going to integrate this into the 4G and 5G solutions. And I'm just worried about, does this mean that they're going to have a priority, a better experience on the Verizon Blue Jean video network than other video services? What does it mean for Zoom and Microsoft and Google, et cetera? So I'm a little cautious on this one.
Well, if I can jump in, I think Verizon also has the burden of dealing with the customers that have already bought Cisco and Zoom and everything else. So they can't diss those customers too hard. So they have to innovate and add value on the Blue Jeans side, but certainly continue at least a fair treatment of the others, at least for the medium term. They depend heavily on that Cisco revenue, so they can't dump those customers or that revenue.
And I also don't think Blue Jeans is something they're going to lead with. I think it's an additional offering to bundle into the suite of stuff they already have. Right. So I think when they're selling a whole suite of stuff to a small business, medium-sized business, Blue Jeans is something that you layer on, and it makes sense that you buy it all. If you're a company, you want to buy it all from one provider. You can buy everything from internet access to meetings to video. I don't think it's a strong enough. I don't think Verizon is a strong enough brand enterprise to go displace Microsoft or Cisco. And and those types of, or even Zoom. So, but it's a bundle play.
Now, the other big acquisition that's happened in the video space was just recent. It was Zoom acquiring Keybase. I think the biggest news story here is Zoom acquired anybody. I mean, Zoom's never acquired a company before. I was kind of under the impression Zoom never would acquire a company. Eric seems to just want to build things. Zeus, what are your thoughts on the acquisition of Keybase?
Well, that was security focused, and Eric's gone on TV, Bloomberg, and all kinds of different sites, and admitted that they really kind of missed the security boat in some cases. There were some things the company underestimated as far as being difficult, and I think an acquisition brought in a lot of security talent that the company didn't have, and so I think Zoom's had gotten beat up quite a bit in the media. Kramer really went after him pretty hard on CNBC, and I think what this does is it tells the industry that Zoom is taking security seriously. As you said, he doesn't acquire really much at all, if anything. And so this is an acquisition they made strictly to address the security side of things. And I think in some ways is showing the industry that they're doing what they have to do. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there's another one coming down the road. I actually think work from home and the COVID-19 trend actually exposes more security risks, because all of a sudden these SaaS applications become a point of entry for hackers. And so I think that's something all the video vendors need to focus on, but Zoom in particular, who's gotten kind of beat up in the media for security. As much as people loved Zoom before, they couldn't wait to jump on the security, on beating them up in security. So I think it had two purposes. One was to beef up what they're doing in security, but I think it was also like a bit of a PR move to indicate that, yes, we are doing something, we're taking it seriously, and we'll spend the money to do it.
Ira?
Yeah, my view on this, I think, number one, when you're the big player, you're in the news, you've got a target on your back. So I think a lot of this has been inflated, and I believe, quite frankly, Zoom needed to spend more time on security. They didn't prioritize it. And making an acquisition like this brings the talent in to focus on security.
That's a good point.
Deal, right?
Yeah.
I think you can only slice talented people so many times over, and those people have been in sell, feature mode for so long that's their reflex. They go in that direction. We need security gurus to work on security issues. I agree with Zeus that the PR value of picking up a security firm is a big deal, but I think the resources focusing on it all day are going to make a big difference here. I'm frankly surprised that it's taken so long for them to make their first acquisition here, and I think we'll see a string of them. There's just too much money sitting there to not go into strategic acquisitions of both talent and, let's call them, additional tangential offerings. They have to do something with that.
Well, a security offering probably didn't cross their radar until some of this stuff happened. So when you think about that, the amount of time to do the due diligence and make this acquisition was actually pretty quick. I think just overall from a Zoom perspective, they've had a pretty big market cap for a while. They could have bought really almost anybody they wanted, right? So,
well, Zoom's always had this move fast, break things mentality, and they've had a few security issues over the past several months, and every time it makes the front page. Zoom's got a terrible security problem. They even got blocked by the Apple the App Store, which is pretty unprecedented. I mean, pretty severe security breaches. But Zoom flips around within hours, certainly within a day, of fixing these things. And they're so agile, and so it's that move fast, break things has kind of worked for them really well. This acquisition to me signals a much more. We're not going to just move fast and break things. We're going to actually approach this very differently. And I think that I think one of the things that I'm picking up in their way they're describing this acquisition is that this acquisition is going to impact both Zoom Chat and Zoom Video. And right now, most of the companies are dealing with, just a few companies are dealing with end-to-end encryption, like Cisco WebEx Teams has end-to-end encryption capabilities on messaging, but mostly messaging is not available with end-to-end encryption. Some video solutions are available with end-to-end encryption, but not very many. And I think Zoom is actually going to come out of this security disaster. Zoom's got the worst security ever reputation with kind of this new, if you want security, go with Zoom type of approach. I think they're going to flip this into a benefit, a strength.
It's not unlike the way Apple came to market with the iPhone, right? Remember, they were getting beat up like crazy for not having the encryption they needed that BlackBerry had at the time and things like that. And that Apple had a very much move fast, break things mentality as well, and then they eventually, not an enterprise would touch them. And now they've really set the standard in a lot of areas of security once they decided to pay attention to it.
But to be fair, a lot of this was cockpit error also. It was just users not doing the right things, using the same meeting ID for every meeting for the last 3 years. I mean, I have thousands of meeting IDs sitting in my calendar. Many of them are probably still live. So I think all of the vendors, all the providers are coming under the same scrutiny. I think Zoom just politely ignored it for too long. I do think it's going to take a while for the reputation hit to recover, for them to recover from that. Not 10 years, but I think it's going to be a year before some of these schools go back and say, you know what, we jumped away because of this concern.
I disagree with you there. I think that most people have already completely forgotten. Zoom's become a verb now, and everybody just wants to Zoom. They don't even mean Zoom. They just want a video conference. And all these big security headlines they had a month ago, I think is long forgotten.
I'll go somewhere in between you two. I do think people will forgive very fast, but I think in the heavily regulated verticals, healthcare, financial, legal, things like that, I think they'll do their due diligence, and I think they'll likely shy away from Zoom initially until it's a little bit of prove me here, because those companies have a lot to lose.
I guess that's part of my premise, is that the majority of people don't care about security, and so they've already forgotten. Certainly there are industries and companies that do care about security, but a lot of people just don't. I mean, Facebook's my best example of that. Facebook would never be as big as it was if people cared about security. And so I think that the general user out there, the general enterprise employee out there, not just consumer, is no longer concerned about that.
But there's another issue here. The general user takes a while to get comfortable and familiar with a platform. And if they've been shifted by IT or by their company or by whoever over to another platform, IT is not going to bounce them around and say, Zoom fixed this, let's jump back. So even though I don't believe the disastrous reputation problem is going to stay that long, I don't think IT managers want to bounce their users. So that's going to slow this down a bit. Whether it's a year, 6 months, 9 months, I don't know. But that's going to slow it down. It's not something you just bounce between like you bounce between, streaming movies or something. You got to do this slowly and carefully for your users.
So let's move over to the video ecosystem I referred to earlier. A lot of different companies, a lot of innovation happening in the video space. We're finally living the WebRTC dream that we were promised, like 6 years ago, where now companies can freely launch new video services. We've seen in the past year, we've seen Fuse, Mitel, 8x8 launching new services, probably a lot more. Sangoma just recently. I think the big one, though, was probably Ring Central with their Ring Central Video. That's probably one of the more notable and bigger launches. They had a tough act because their customers were already using Zoom, so they're not just launching like their first generation. Hey, check this out, see if you like it. They had to actually they wanted to displace one of the leading brands out there. Thoughts on that, Ira?
Yeah, I think Ring Central needed to do something that was not just different. They needed to demonstrate that they were somewhat independent, and that if Zoom decided we're not going to work with you anymore because it's too competitive, that they were not going to abandon their customers. They needed to keep customers from shifting over to Zoom Phone. So they had no choice but to do this, right? It actually took longer than I expected. I thought it would have happened, a couple of quarters ago, but it's here, and I think it's the right play. It's a smart move.
Zeus?
I think Tyra's point, I think it is something they had to do, because Ring is basically a calling company, right? The contact center's partnered, meetings are partnered, and if you think about the future of communications, values in the contact center and meetings, and I think calling becomes a bit of a commodity. And so it was easy for Zoom to commoditize what Ring does, but it was very difficult for Ring to commoditize what Zoom does. And so the best way to do that is to build your own. And the WebRTC version of RCV actually is very good. Zoom's WebRTC doesn't let you share documents, Ring does. And I think they actually made it look a lot like Zoom to make the bridge easier for its customers too, right? The look and feel tends to be a cross between that and Teams a little bit, with the way the icons are laid out and things like that. So the transition for its customers, if they want to go down that route, should be good. I talked with their partners. Their partners are seeing a lot of demand for it as well. I would like to see Ring talk a little bit about the future of this a little more. When I saw Vlad on Kramer, he just said that the differentiator was MVP, which was meetings, video, and phone, which frankly everybody has, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the future is a lot of the advanced capabilities and AI things that are coming. So they should be focused more on that. But I do think it's something that Ring needed to do, and RCV's it's a strong product, and I think it can stand on its own. And
well, UCaaS has really changed over the past couple of years, and not long ago, UCaaS was really basically hosted telephony, and now it's really becoming very clearly hosted telephony, meetings capabilities, and a messaging capabilities, and then concurrently, there's a strong shift toward owned and controlled technologies, and so now we're seeing a lot of these companies, the top UCaaS companies, Cisco, Microsoft, Vonage, RingCentral, 8x8. I'm sure I'm offending somebody by not listing their name, but the point is that they're all now having their own and controlled stacks, clients, own and controlled clients for telephony, video, and meetings. And so I think that it's an important shift. And I can see why they had to switch from Zoom for that one reason, not to mention the fact that Zoom is also doing the exact same thing from the video side.
In fact, my no jitter post on when RCV launched, I did point that out, that it's the real announcement was they own their stack, right? And that's going to allow them to do a whole bunch of things in the future. You figure if you partner with Zoom, then if you want to make an update to your product, you got to wait for them to do it. And so now they control their own destiny.
But also all of this is commoditizing. It was telephony commoditizing, meetings are commoditizing now. I mean, everybody's looking for new ways to innovate and differentiate, and workflow is the big play. And you can only differentiate so much when you're dependent on somebody else's product, somebody else's API, somebody else's UI. So they had no choice but to do that, right?
Speaking of commoditizing, we saw recently Google. They seem to have all of a sudden remembered that they launched a product called Meet a couple of years ago, and they saw everybody video conferencing and Zoom becoming a verb and a noun and whatever. And so they upgraded Meet with some new features. Thoughts on Meet? I mean, did you remember about Meet? Is Meet viable? What are your thoughts on that?
So go ahead, Zeus. Go ahead.
So, Google loves to sort of tinker with things, but never take anything seriously. I think in the K through 12 space, where they're using Google Docs and Google Learning and Google Draw and things like that, it's
Google Classroom.
Google Class, it'll be fine. I haven't really ever talked to any large enterprises that have standardized around, Google, except for maybe the Google Docs, right? But it's something that I'm not. Okay, you're right. Actually, Dave, I think the way you described it was good. It's like, oh my God, we forgot about video, or in meetings. Everyone's into it now. We got to beef ours up, and I just think Google tends to be. I wouldn't even say they're a fast follower. I just think they're a follower, and they always seem to have products that are kind of like what's out in the market, but never really better than. And because of that, even with the Google brand, they have a very hard time getting traction.
But Meet has always been like the unfunded stepchild, for lack of a better. It's there. It kind of works. We put into it what we need to keep our G Suite customers happy, and so they don't go elsewhere and invest elsewhere. But it hasn't been the innovation centerpiece. And it's funny. A couple of months ago, right before all the COVID hit, we tested out some, I guess you'd call them, homespun ways of adding tile functionality to Google. So people are innovating around Google, and I'm talking about schools and just normal people out there creating new functions because Google didn't do it, right? So now you suddenly see COVID, you see this monstrous amount of usage, and you see everybody clamoring for more scalability and functionality. They had to invest, right? It's just too bad it took so long, because I think that they could have had an amazing platform earlier, and now they're just backfilling.
But in some ways, has it mattered? If they had been Zoom, you look at the revenue of Zoom. It's not a needle mover for Google, right? So you have to think with Google, if it impacts search, it's important, and if it doesn't, it's a hobby, right?
Well, I disagree with that notion. Yes, I think that Google Cloud is a very different business than Google Consumer advertising and search, and I get the impression, the leadership has changed there, that they are getting a little more serious. And they got to be looking at Zoom saying, why isn't that us? They got to be looking at Office 365 saying, we were there first. Why isn't that us? And so the new leadership there, I get the impression they're a little more serious. They have put more into Google Meet in the past, month than they have in the past 2 years. And I'm wondering if that's not going to, if that's going to continue. I'm thinking it is going to continue. They've got a lot of work to do in room systems. They got to get the background substitution figured out. They've got a bunch of features that they still got to bring to the market. And they've got opportunity to do a freemium model like Zoom has done. I think that I got to believe that they're looking at that saying that should be us.
Well, they get scale and reach like nobody except Amazon, maybe, right? So if they want this market, right, they get the resources to do it. They got to prove to the industry that they want the market.
But if you look at it, it's kind of like they have, a little bit to gain, but a lot to lose. If people suddenly start going elsewhere and they say, you know what, I'm not seeing a lot of action happening over in the meat world, let's go over to Teams. Next thing you know, they're abandoning G Suite. Next thing you know, they're abandoning advertising and they're shifting away to another entire platform. So I think they have to at least offer a, on par plus offering compared to the competition.
And that brings me to
that for a long time.
And that brings me to my next question. If we think that Google Meet was a defensive opportunity, they saw what was happening, they had to do something. What is going to be the defensive reaction to Google Meet being free and available and part of G Suite? Any thoughts on that? I have a thought on that. I've written about it, but my feeling is that Microsoft is going to respond and make meetings free and available without requiring Teams. I think that Teams is holding back Microsoft meetings. We just saw, Google, Microsoft said they had 200. What was the number they announced? It was starts with a 2. It was 200,000 daily users. I think it was. Does that sound right?
I think so.
And then Zoom came out like the next week and said we have 300,000. I don't know if the numbers are right, but it was a 50% increase higher on Zoom. And I've got to believe that Microsoft is saying, well, why is Zoom beating us with our huge base? So I think they're going to pull out in response to both Zoom and in response to Google, pull out meetings and make it just a core service of Outlook and Exchange and make it more accessible. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, and actually the integration of the stack that you brought up, Dave, I think poses an interesting question, right? How long will customers double pay for these things, right? You see a lot of customers paying for Slack for chat and Zoom for video and, somebody else for Ring, maybe for voice or whatever, right? Or Microsoft, for with Teams or something. And so all these things are pretty tightly integrated now. And it doesn't appear that, there's a reason in a year or two that anybody would want to double pay or triple pay for some of these things. And so the question is, how do you get your foot in the door? And if Google's given it away, then maybe that's their opportunity too. I still don't think it's a strong enough product, but if Microsoft responds that way and takes that, barrier off the table, they're already in almost every account anyways. That could be enough to certainly tip it their way. So.
But we need to remember the cult factor, right? I mean, Microsoft is in every enterprise, and frankly, a lot of the IT people who are making these decisions have made every penny since graduation on their Microsoft certifications. Same thing with the Cisco folks, right? They have a cult operating there, so they don't have to have a better solution. They have to have accessibility, reasonable price, and an integration with the rest of the stack, right? I do believe that Microsoft could and should spin off a basic video client from Teams and make it a little bit more accessible, just get some more volume going. But I think it should be basic functionality. I think it should be similar to the freemium that others are offering, and with a very big drive to get you into Teams, or more importantly, into the rest of the Microsoft discussion. Right? I think they have to do that. Will they do it soon? I don't know. Will they do it at all? Maybe, but if they want the users, they have to get us out of that Teams wrapper, because not everybody needs Teams. Some people just want to make a call. And they do have to get rid of that, sticker shock up front, even though it's dollars per month, it's still more than zero. I think you're right on that one.
Well, let's get over to some of the new features we've seen. There hasn't really been that much. Everybody's been so focused on just keeping their networks up and running during this crisis. I noticed that Microsoft released their raise hand feature. Any reactions to that one?
Well, actually, it's funny. It's an important feature, though. And it's certainly not new. Lots of people have that. But I do think when you're doing a lot of web-based meetings like this, and more obviously with the work from home, people want to be able to ask questions and interrupt. And I think people are somewhat shy about doing that. So the raise hand feature actually, in this era, actually with people working from home does actually have some merit to it. It took them a long time to do it, considering how long raised hands been around on other platforms. But it's fun.
Kind of one of those, yeah, whatever, put it in. Somebody who wants to use it will use it kind of features, and that's okay. But we should think about this. Not only do we have more people using these platforms, we have people who have traditionally not embraced these platforms, who don't have the etiquette or
ever used them, right?
Correct. Yeah. So they're going through a learning curve, but they're also going through an attitude and a behavioral curve. So they have to understand that you wait for people to finish talking, you give people a chance to finish, you give it that half to 1 second delay before the next person jumps in. And raise hand can help alleviate some of that crosstalk. So I think it's fine, but it's not a game changer, and it certainly isn't new.
And nobody's going to buy it or not buy it because of raised hand, right?
But I'd pay extra, double, right, for the raised hand.
Well, we need more ways of communicating two-way on a video. Particularly, this is just three of us here, but sometimes you've got a much bigger environment. I'm not impressed with the raise hand feature. It feels skeuomorphic to me. But I do think we need to have more ways of communicating. Like for example, if maybe if you're in a room presenting to a bunch of people and somebody's like, having to leave early because they have a commitment, they have to leave early, you can see them kind of like gather their stuff together, and you have a clue that they're about to leave. You need more visual indicators like that. And so whether it's something like, I have to leave or whatever. In the social platforms, you have the hand clapping to show when you're really pleased with what you're hearing. But I think we need more tools like that to kind of just indicate kind of a mental status or a status or like emojis or something. Raising hand to me feels like it's just one thing, one function, whatever, and doing it means something's going to happen, which you may not want to do, where these emojis I'm describing or emotions might be more just as a signal to the person.
It's funny you mentioned that. I remember Second Life, when that was sort of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I remember talking to IBM about that. They were trying to change the culture around virtual meetings by getting people to react differently. And so if a presenter was presented in Second Life and you agreed with the presenter, they wanted you to move to the left. And if you disagreed, they wanted you to move to the right. And so you took actions like that to be able to give the presenter real-time feedback. You're right, most of these platforms don't have that, and some way of being able to do that. And I think raised hand in some ways does do that. If you are presenting and you want to ask a question, you don't want to interrupt, you can raise your hand and then go down the speaker can, if you could actually tag when they raise their hand, the speaker can go down the list. But that's just one feature of many that should come.
But if you look at it, I guess I'm a bit of a purist here. I want fewer buttons, fewer distractions. During this call here, we've been on for 25 minutes. I have a Teams chat sitting there. I have a Zoom chat sitting there, and I've had 2 messages already here. I don't know that I need another way of interrupting and distracting everyone. I think we're on video. We can see each other. I know when Zeus wants to talk. I know when you're talking. I think we just have to learn to actually look at each other when we're talking and deal with each other like we would in person. So again, put the feature in, that's fine. As long as it's buried out of the way and it doesn't bother me. When I have a 300-person meeting, maybe. But when I'm in a 3, a 5, a 10, I think together we can figure out how to be civil enough to have a meeting. That would be
all right. Well, let's use that to segue to the next section. In the final section, what's next? We've all of a sudden been very focused for the past few months on enabling work from home, on enabling meetings from remote participants, but often for the first time. What can we expect over the next rest of this year and even beyond that?
I have a suggestion. Unfortunately, the providers won't listen. Do nothing. Stop adding new bells and whistles. We're confused enough, and tighten your code. Just clean it up. Add a little bit of additional ease of use. Give me some better integration. Simplify the discussion. Simplify your business models. Hug your channel. Figure out all of this. I mean, in the AV and video industry, we're a good 2 years into the slowdown on features, which isn't sexy because we're all waiting for new bells and whistles. But this is the time where you take all these sprints you've been doing and shore them up. So we will see new features. We'll see new security options. We'll see new layouts. We'll see more AI. But I'd rather we err on the side of stability, good code, scalability, versus bells and whistles, which
you're in the Hamilton camp. Speak less.
Absolutely, speak less. Absolutely.
All right, Zeus.
I actually think it's the rise of the video-enabled business process, and along with that, the video APIs. And Alan Mazarek, in the last, I think in one of the interviews he did, he talked about how their video API business has grown like multiple 100%. And I think that's an important part of the growth of ubiquitous video. So these platforms are using Zoom and Vonage and RCV. They're great for meetings like this, right? But if I'm a doctor and I want to be able to discuss patient records with somebody, I know I could go grab those patient records and share them through this or share them through WebEx or whatever. But that's extra level of complexity that people need how to figure out. And if they want to change speakers, things like that, there's confusion. If I could just build video into the apps that I'm already using, that could greatly help. And so
I think this virus is going to cause it's already started explosion of workflow apps with video. Vonage has reported that. Twilio just reported the other day, and I think we're going to see a video coming to, particularly in telemedicine. But beyond telemedicine, I think there's just going to be so many different applications that have video built into it. But near term, I think that's
exactly what I mean, though. Just to put it out there, that we don't need new features. We need simplified workflow that helps us get things done.
We don't need more apps on our desktop, as you mentioned.
Correct.
We need more features built into the apps we're already using.
And we've been trying this for years, by the way. There's nothing new here, but quite frankly, that's additional work. And those different use cases weren't screaming for video, but now they are. So now the industry has the motivation and, frankly, the pending orders to do the work that should have been done years ago.
And Dave, I think the other part where we need some innovation too is better internet access. I think the one thing that COVID has exposed is the lack of democratization of internet access in this country.
That's what's really surprised me about the federal government's response with the COVID bills and the funding that they've done, that they haven't prioritized internet build out.
Even to the point of every person. I talked to a school teacher in one of the poor districts in Massachusetts the other day, and maybe half her students have laptops, and they're trying to learn over mobile devices, and there's not the cell towers are overloaded there. And so this is something the government really needs to pay attention to, and we need to have a critical infrastructure build up in this country.
Last year, we saw an explosion in what they call the huddle room space. There was a lot of new device, a lot of new attention on huddle room. That all stopped over the past few months because of work at home. But as we start to go back to the office, and not everyone goes back to the office, I think that there's going to be renewed focus on huddle room, probably much more so than we saw last year. I think there's going to be a lot of build out of shared meeting spaces. And I also think that Zoom nailed it with the virtual backgrounds. I didn't realize that when they launched that, I didn't realize how important and how personal people were going to respond to that. I think that Microsoft's just launched a background substitution. That's not, you can't load your own pictures, but you could choose from their pictures, which gives you the privacy element that you may not want to share what's behind you. But I think that feature is going to probably become a standard feature over the next few years for every platform out there.
So let me jump in on huddle rooms. It's an interesting topic, and we've done a lot of analyzing and presenting on this. What's going to happen short term is the huddle rooms are going to become the offices, because we put everybody in these cubicles. We put them 5 feet away from each other at a time where we need distancing. So as people come back, they're going to start grabbing huddle rooms for private workspaces. The medium rooms are going to become small meeting rooms, because I can have distance. And the large meeting rooms are going to become small meeting rooms. It's fascinating. So the large boardroom is going to be a place where 3 people can go, have a meeting, and have proper social distance. It's fascinating.
Yeah,
There's going to be a resurgence there.
I think where we're heading is workplace flexibility, and the huddle room will be part of that, but also video on walls will be. I think the future of work looks like a lot of when we were in college. I think we do a lot of work from home. When we have a bunch of meetings, we go to the office, we meet with people. We don't have a permanent desk. We choose a desk to sit at. We might want to go meet, but instead of going to the library, we go into a huddle room. And so I think flexible workspaces become really important. And actually, I think what you might see is like large meeting rooms have movable walls, and I can make it 3 huddle rooms, or I can make it 1 medium-sized room and 1 small room, that type of thing. And I think companies need to start really thinking about the future of work being, more flexibility for workers to do what they want to without having fixed workspaces.
I think
we've talked about Zoom and security a little bit, but in the context of just what's happening in the next few years in video, how do you think security is going to get treated by other companies?
So I want to jump in on huddle, and then I'll jump in on security. I think the challenge with the flexible workspace is how quickly can the cleaning staff get there and clean up that desk that somebody else sat at this morning. That's my big concern, or last night. So I think you're going to find flexible working, but I think it's going to be, okay, I'm in the office Monday, Wednesday, they're in the office Tuesday, Thursday, and we do some time shifting there, and we give our cleaning teams time to get in there and sanitize, at least until we've got a vaccine that's pushed out. So I think there's going to be flexibility, but I'm not quite sure it's going to be grab a desk. I think it's going to be grab a time slot. We know what's happening, and we've scheduled the cleaning crew and the safety for you.
Yeah. You'll have to book your time in and things like that, right?
Exactly, and there'll be a little, there'll be a little mint sitting there on the desk with a little note that says you've been sanitized, which will work perfectly, right? Now, in terms of security, I think everybody is going to not leapfrog each other, but I think everybody in the industry is going to work together to get that base level of security. I mean, they're not going to have this meeting and say, let's do it, guys, but everybody's watching each other for additional ways of adding more security, whether perceived or real, to the discussion. And I think everybody's going to have to stick with that baseline in order to be in consideration as the enterprise looks at solutions. So
it actually is good to see the focus on security now. I know it's something that Cisco beat that drum for years and nobody listened. And I remember talking to Jonathan Rosenberg about that. How do we make it matter? And it's like people just don't. It doesn't matter because people don't think about it, right? And
right. That's the interesting thing about the Zoom debacle the last few months and how much security came to the forefront. I've seen more from other vendors about security in the past month. They all looked at what happened to Zoom and said, that's not going to happen to us. And there's been a number of releases. Microsoft's done a bunch of releases. 8x8 put out some really interesting stuff on where they're going with WebRTC with end-to-end encrypted video, which is coming, I guess, near term. We've got companies like Symphony that are targeting the Bloomberg space and financial markets. What do they call it, Ira? Digital proximity?
Yes, digital proximity.
Yeah.
It's a good concept.
Actually, I think, and I know the Symphony product very well. I came out of financial services, and I think they do something that nobody else does, and that's on the compliance side. They get a huge compliance. With them, it's overkill. But everybody's got this base level of encryption now. What they do is they have all these compliance things set up to say that Ira can upload documents into this when he's in the office or in these locations, but not this location. And you have to start thinking that way. If you're a doctor in a hospital in the public space, maybe you don't let them download personal records to a tablet, things like that, right? So there's a lot of work that's going to come on the compliance side for regulated verticals that we don't have yet.
But if you think about it, right, there have been a lot of reasons why, let's call them specific workflows, regulated verticals have shied away from some of the more general and cost-effective tools. It's either security concerns or workflow. Well, we're hitting both of those now. Yeah. So you start to wonder if, telehealth, which is either on a special platform or is a roll your own kind of thing, we're using SDKs and building your own app. Maybe that's going to start to roll into some of these more standard platforms, the Teams and the Zooms and all that, because those platforms will have the security and have the workflow built in. I mean, nobody wants to build these. They build them when they can't find what they need off the shelf.
All right. Well, with that, I think we will wrap up this video on video. I want to thank my colleagues for joining me on this. We went a little longer than I had expected, but I guess, we invited Zeus, so, But anyway, again, thank you very much for joining me, and thank you very much for watching this video. Thanks.
Thank you.